Two men in Germany were out exploring the fields when they found two pipes sticking up from the ground in the middle of nowhere.
What began as an ordinary walk through a quiet field quickly turned into something far stranger. Two men stumbled upon a set of pipes jutting out of the ground, a sight that seemed oddly out of place. What they found after tracing those pipes was a hidden underground world that no one could have expected. Could forgotten war bunkers, secret experiments, or abandoned facilities lie just beneath our feet? Why would such a vast maze be hidden for decades? And what disturbing secrets could explain the graffiti, the strange machines, and the chilling words carved into the walls? One thing is certain, this was no ordinary discovery. Pipes in the field. It started with something so small that most people would have walked past without a second thought. Two pipes, metal, weathered, sticking up from the soil in the middle of an open field. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, maybe even useless, as though someone had forgotten about them decades ago. But the site didn't fit the setting. Farmland is meant to be clean, flat, predictable. Crops, soil, fences, not two rusting pipes pointing at the sky like strange markers. Their very presence felt wrong, and that wrongness was enough to spark suspicion. The men stood there, circling the pipes, trying to piece together why they were there at all. Were they part of a water drainage system left behind by some long-forgotten project? That would have made sense in a rural area. But the pipes weren't shaped like typical drainage, and they weren't placed near any obvious water channels. Maybe, then known, they belonged to an abandoned factory. After all, much of Europe still holds the bones of old industries buried in forests and fields. The thought gave the scene a darker edge. What kind of factory leaves behind vents in the middle of nowhere? And yet, another possibility lingered at the back of their minds. A possibility too unsettling to ignore. What if these weren't just leftover scraps of some ordinary structure? What if the pipes were breathing tubes, air shafts for something concealed below? The idea was far-fetched, but it explained why the pipes were still upright, still open. Something might be underneath. That thought changed everything. If that raised questions, the next reveal will shake everything you thought you knew. The hidden entrance. As they scanned the field, their search pulled them towards something half-buried, almost invisible, beneath years of neglect. At first, it looked like nothing more than a patch of uneven ground covered in branches, leaves, and soil. But when one of the men brushed away the debris with his boot, the surface gave a dull, hollow sound. Wood, not earth. They knelt closer, peeling back the cover of dirt and weeds until the shape revealed itself. A lid, rough planks nailed together, weathered from time, yet still intact. It was no accident. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep this hidden. The discovery made the pipes suddenly make sense. They weren't random. They were markers, maybe even vents. The lid was an entrance, disguised deliberately. Their hands trembled as they cleared away more debris, their excitement tangled with unease. What could possibly require a hidden door in the middle of farmland? They pried at the edges, finding it stubborn, until one man produced a crowbar. The wood gave way with a groan, breaking the silence of the field. Beneath it, darkness yawned, and at the bottom of a short descent stood another barrier, an iron door. This was no casual storage space. The door looked industrial, thick and reinforced, the kind designed to keep something out or in. A broken lock dangled uselessly from its latch, suggesting that they weren't the first to find this place. That detail unsettled them. Who had broken the lock? When? And why had they gone inside? The mystery deepened with every glance at the rusting steel. The haunting hallway. The first step inside was like crossing into another world. Gone was the wide-open air of the fields, replaced by a concrete corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Its walls were stark and gray, like something from an old hospital or a government facility. The air felt heavy, carrying the faint smell of rust and damp stone. Light from their flashlights bounced back in sharp, sterile reflections, making the passageway seem both familiar and alien. It was a hallway built for function, not comfort, and its emptiness pressed down on them. What struck them next was the sound. Every movement, every shuffle of their boots, exploded into echoes that clung to the walls before fading into the distance. The acoustics gave the space a strange, almost haunted quality, as though the building itself were alive and listening. A cough or a nervous laugh multiplied into something eerie, filling the void with whispers of their own voices. The silence in between those echoes was even worse, thick, expectant, as if waiting for something to stir. As they walked deeper, the corridor revealed faint signs that they weren't the first to pass through. On the dusty floor lay an old shopping bag, its plastic surface crumpled and brittle from age. Next to it, a length of metal pipe, seemingly discarded but strangely out of place. Neither object belonged in a sterile, bunker-like hallway. Both hinted at others who had once stood where they were standing, others who had explored, or maybe lived, in this forgotten place. A maze underground. The deeper they went, the more the space unfolded into something unnerving. The single hallway branched into another, then another, until the men realized they were standing at the center of a network. It wasn't just one passage, it was a maze. Endless corridors snaked in different directions, each one nearly identical to the last. Without a map, without markings, it was easy to imagine becoming hopelessly lost. The longer they stared at the intersections, the more they understood the danger. One wrong turn, and they might never find their way back. That thought alone was enough to anchor them in caution. One man suggested they choose a single direction and stick with it, no matter what they found. The other agreed. Wandering aimlessly could mean walking in circles forever, trapped in a gray labyrinth beneath the earth. So they made a pact. Forward, always forward, resisting the temptation to peek into the side passages that beckoned with mystery. It wasn't bravery that kept them steady, but survival instinct. In a place like this, curiosity had to be controlled. Still, as they walked on, the deliberate design of the space became impossible to ignore. These weren't random tunnels carved without thought. The walls were clean and even, the angles sharp, the intersections too precise to be accidental. It was as if the entire structure had been built with a purpose, though what that purpose might be remained hidden. The halls resembled the planning of something official, military, scientific, or perhaps industrial, but the sheer scale suggested more than ordinary use. Someone had invested time, resources, and secrecy into constructing this underground maze. Disturbing graffiti. The hallways had been silent for so long that even the faintest detail stood out sharply. That's why the graffiti struck them so hard. At first glance, it was just crude writing sprayed across the cold concrete, but the words themselves froze them in place. Die! Help! The letters were jagged, uneven, and scrawled in a way that suggested urgency rather than art. There was nothing playful or artistic about it. It wasn't the kind of graffiti that decorated abandoned buildings for fun. These words felt raw, desperate, even hostile. Their first instinct was to dismiss it as the work of vandals. Urban explorers often leave marks behind, and sometimes the darker the word, the more it shocks the next visitor. Maybe some teenagers had stumbled down here years ago and decided to add their own sense of drama. That explanation was simple, comforting even, but the more they studied the walls, the harder it was to hold on to that idea. The handwriting didn't look rehearsed or calculated. It looked rushed, almost frantic, as though the person who wrote it wasn't trying to make art at all, but to send a message. That possibility shifted everything. What if help wasn't just a dramatic word? What if someone had actually been trapped down here? And what about die? Was it a threat, a warning, or a record of something that had already happened? Each word carried weight, pulling them deeper into unease. They had come here chasing curiosity, following the mystery of a hidden entrance. But now, the mystery had teeth. The walls themselves seemed to speak, and what they said wasn't welcoming. The heavy yellow door. The further they pushed into the maze, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Then they saw it. A door unlike anything else in the tunnels. It was massive, painted a faded yellow, its metal surface scarred with rust and time. The thing looked more at home in a bank vault than in a hidden underground corridor. Its sheer size and weight made it clear. This wasn't just a door. It was a barrier, built to keep something sealed away. The men shone their flashlights across the surface, studying the details. The hinges were thick, industrial, far stronger than anything they had seen so far. Whoever had designed this space hadn't cut corners here. The door wasn't simply about access. It was about security, maybe even survival. That fact alone raised more questions than it answered. Why would a place like this need such a reinforced entrance, buried so deep beneath farmland? What were they trying to protect, or perhaps to contain? As they circled the frame, their eyes caught something that made the scene even stranger. Acrylic letters, bolted to the door in the Slavic alphabet. The words weren't easy to decipher, but after a moment of squinting and whispering translations back and forth, the meaning came clear. Exit number 2. That revelation only added to the puzzle. An exit implies a system, a plan, perhaps even a network of doors leading in and out of this underground structure. If this was number 2, then where was number 1? And more importantly, how large was the facility hiding beneath the soil? The broken hinges told their own story. The yellow door, once immovable, had been ripped from its frame and dragged aside. But by whom? And how? The door was heavy, impossibly so, yet here it stood, leaning uselessly against the wall like a discarded relic. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Someone had been here before them. Someone strong enough, prepared enough, or desperate enough to break through. Flooded chambers. After the heavy yellow door, the corridors began to change. The air grew damp, and the steady sound of dripping water echoed off the walls. Soon, the men's flashlights revealed what lay ahead. Entire rooms partly submerged in murky, stagnant pools. The water was dark, clouded with silt and debris, its surface rippling with each drop from the ceiling. Concrete floors gave way to slick patches where the water lapped higher, flooding hallways and swallowing doorways. The tunnels had shifted from dry, hollow silence to a place that felt alive yet decaying. The sight alone was unsettling, but the risk it posed was worse. Stagnant water hides what lies beneath. Every step forward threatened to sink them into uneven flooring, jagged rubble, or unseen holes. A single misstep could mean injury, or worse, being trapped in the depths of water thick with rot. Contamination was another fear that pressed at their minds. The smell carried hints of mold, rust, and chemicals, a mix that suggested the water wasn't natural. What had seeped into it? What toxins or bacteria lingered in the still pools? In the wrong moment, a splash or a cut could be dangerous. Yet what unsettled them most was the question of intent. Was this flooding the result of years of neglect, pipes bursting, rainwater seeping, groundwater rising unchecked? Or was it something else entirely? The idea that the flooding could have been deliberate crept into their thoughts. The layout of the tunnels made it possible. Gates, chambers, corridors designed to trap water in specific areas. Perhaps the floods weren't an accident at all, but a barrier, a way to keep people from reaching certain sections of the complex. Keep your eyes peeled, because the next one will change the way you look at the ordinary. Shadows in the dark. The tunnels had been unsettling before, but the flooded chambers had drained some of their confidence. The men pressed forward anyway, flashlights cutting through the damp air, their boots splashing lightly as they skirted the edge of the water. That was when it happened. One of them lifted his light, sweeping it upward, and froze. Perched on a ledge above the corridor, half hidden in shadow, was the silhouette of a man crouched, still, watching. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The figure was unmistakable, broad shoulders hunched forward, arms dangling loosely, the outline of a head turned just slightly, as if in their direction. It looked old, frail even, like the shadow of a man who had been waiting there for years. The sight jolted them both with a rush of panic. They weren't alone. Or at least, it didn't feel that way. But the longer they stared, the more doubt crept in. Was it really a man, or was it just a trick of light and shadow? The walls were cracked, water-stained, and uneven. Pipes and broken supports jutted out from odd angles. Could their frightened minds have arranged these shapes into the outline of a person? The stillness of the figure gave no answers. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. Yet something about its presence felt undeniable. Their thoughts raced through possibilities. If it was a real person, what was he doing here? Was he living in the tunnels, waiting for intruders? Was he a remnant of the facility's past? Some worker or soldier who never left? The darker thought pressed harder. What if he wasn't alive at all? What if what they were seeing was something left behind? Something lingering? Strange machinery. Deeper into the complex, past corridors that bent and branched like veins, the men came upon something that stopped them cold. It was massive, a hulking shape rising from the center of a large chamber. Their flashlights struggled to capture it in one sweep. Steel beams, panels, wheels, pipes that snaked into the walls and ceiling. The machine dominated the room like some kind of mechanical beast, silent now, but once clearly alive with motion. Its very presence shifted the tone of the tunnels. This was no empty shelter. Something important had once been done here. The machine's purpose was impossible to pin down. It wasn't like anything either of them recognized from factories, power plants, or farming equipment. Its design was too complex, its parts too specialized. Was it meant to generate power, process materials, or had it served some more secretive purpose? The silence offered no clues. All that remained was the rust, the dust, and the feeling that the machine had been abandoned mid-use, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. But the details around the machine made things worse. In the cracks of the walls, where concrete had split and gaped, the men noticed gloves stuffed deep into the gaps. Old, brittle, but unmistakably once used. Someone had worn them, worked with them, and then hidden them in the very structure of the room. The sight was chilling. Gloves were not graffiti. Gloves weren't careless litter. They were evidence of activity, of labor, of presence. It was proof that this machine hadn't been a relic from construction alone. It had been operated, maintained, and touched by human hands. Cryptic warnings. As if the graffiti hadn't been enough, the corridors began to reveal something even more unsettling: signs. Unlike the frantic scrawls of spray paint, these were cleaner, more deliberate. Scattered across doorways and propped against walls, the words were blunt and unmistakable: "Stay back." Some were hand-painted on scraps of wood, others stenciled in bold letters onto rusting metal plates. They weren't artistic, they weren't theatrical. They were commands. The men stood over the first sign for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Who had put it there? Was it left behind by the original builders of the tunnels? A final directive to keep intruders away from something hidden deeper inside? Or was it placed later, by explorers who had seen too much and decided to leave a warning for the next foolhardy soul? Both possibilities were troubling. Either way, someone wanted to keep others from moving forward. The further they went, the more the warnings multiplied. "Stay back," scrawled across walls. "Do not enter," painted in dripping black letters. Each message seemed to grow more insistent, as if the tunnels themselves were raising their voice, trying to push them away. The repetition carried weight. A single sign could be dismissed as a prank. A dozen, scattered in the shadows, suggested something far more deliberate. With each step, the unease grew thicker. The men couldn't shake the sensation that the signs weren't just relics. They felt fresh somehow, almost watchful. Their flashlights cut across the letters, and the painted strokes seemed to follow them, clinging to their movements. Every corner, every doorway held the chance of a new warning, and with it, the gnawing question: Who was writing these? Unnatural formations. Not long after the warnings, the tunnels revealed something stranger still. Hanging from the ceilings and jutting from the walls were formations that looked, at first glance, like icicles. Long, sharp points of mineral growth stretched downward, dripping with moisture, as if the underground space were frozen in winter. But it wasn't cold. The air was heavy, warm, and damp. There was no reason for ice to exist here, and yet the shapes gleamed in the flashlight beams, white and crystalline against the dark concrete. The men stopped, staring upward in disbelief. One whispered that they must be stalactites, the kind found in caves, formed over centuries as water dripped mineral by mineral into stone. But this wasn't a natural cave. These were man-made corridors, carved in cement and steel. How could formations like this appear here in such an environment? The more logical explanation was chemical, perhaps minerals leaching from the walls, reacting with water in ways that produced these spindly, crystalline fingers. A scientific answer fit the puzzle neatly, and yet, standing beneath them, the explanation didn't feel complete. The formations looked too deliberate, too out of place, as though the tunnels themselves were sprouting unnatural growths. Their presence blurred the line between construction and nature, between logic and something harder to define. One man muttered that they looked like teeth, jagged and waiting, ready to snap shut. The thought was a joke, but neither of them laughed. In the silence, the dripping water gave the impression that the formations were alive, slowly expanding, growing stronger with time. Traces of occupation. By now, the tunnels felt less like an untouched relic and more like a place that had quietly endured decades of intruders. The men began to notice details they had overlooked in their earlier rush of curiosity. Scraps of old paper crumpled in corners, faint shoe prints pressed into the dust, cigarette butts yellowed with age. Each fragment whispered the same thing. Others had been here before. This wasn't a secret discovery in the purest sense. It was a place stumbled upon again and again, yet somehow never spoken of beyond whispers. The graffiti confirmed it. Layer upon layer of markings spread across the walls, some faded into near invisibility, others fresh enough that the paint still shone under their flashlights. Dates, names, symbols, even crude drawings that hinted at explorers separated by decades. The tunnels, it seemed, had been quietly collecting visitors for years, perhaps generations, yet the world above remained largely unaware. The realization unsettled them. How could so many have come and gone without the place becoming known, catalogued, or studied? That question gnawed deeper as they studied the overlapping graffiti. Some messages were playful, even careless, the kind of scrawls left behind by bored teenagers daring each other to go deeper. Others felt darker, written in quick strokes, carrying words of warning or despair. Together, they painted a timeline of unnoticed visitors, each group leaving traces of fear, bravado, or confusion before vanishing back to the surface. It was like a hidden record, carved in paint and marker, of countless silent encounters with the underground. Military bunker theories. The deeper the men went, the more the tunnels hinted at something larger than personal use or urban exploration. The heavy doors, the concrete corridors, the scale of the machinery, it all pointed toward design with intention. One theory began to rise above the rest. This might not have been an industrial site at all. It might have been military. Eastern Europe is littered with remnants of war and secrecy. From World War II through the height of the Cold War, governments carved the earth into shelters, command centers, and storage bunkers. Many of these complexes were built far from cities, disguised beneath farmland or forests, so their locations would remain invisible to enemies. The idea that this maze of hallways belonged to that era suddenly seemed plausible. The reinforced doors, the multiple exits, even the ventilation pipes sticking up from the ground above, all of it fit the design of a facility meant to hide people or operations from the outside world. The men considered the possibilities. Could this have been a bomb shelter, prepared for nuclear war? The Cold War had driven entire nations to burrow underground, preparing for a conflict that never came. Or perhaps it had been a weapons storage facility, a place to lock away equipment in case of invasion. The machine they had seen earlier could have been tied to power generation, water systems, or even experiments shielded from prying eyes. Each guess carried weight, but none offered certainty. What made the thought even more chilling was the secrecy. If this really had been military, why had it been abandoned without record? Why were there no warnings above ground, no markers of history? The silence around the tunnels might not have been accidental. It could have been deliberate. The kind of silence enforced when governments want the past to be buried as deeply as the structures themselves. The thought that they might be walking through a relic of global tension, a place built for war and survival, brought a new layer of unease. This wasn't just an abandoned maze. It was a reminder of a time when humanity dug into the earth, preparing for the end of the world. And now, decades later, the men were uncovering what was never meant to be casually found. Urban legends and whispers. Every hidden place gathers stories, and this one was no exception. Long before the two men stumbled across those pipes, locals had whispered about odd things in the fields. Farmers spoke of hearing faint metallic clanks rising from beneath the soil on still nights, or muffled echoes that seemed to travel through the earth itself. Some claimed it was the wind moving through hollow spaces underground. Others weren't so sure. The noises were inconsistent, appearing without warning, and always leaving behind a trace of unease. Over time, those whispers stretched into urban legend. Some said the tunnels were the remains of a Nazi stronghold, a fortress abandoned but never fully emptied. Others claimed it was Soviet, a Cold War laboratory buried in secrecy, where experiments had been conducted far from prying eyes. There were even darker tales, that prisoners had been held underground, their voices lingering in the walls, or that chemical tests had been carried out, leaving the air heavy with toxins. None of these stories carried proof, but all of them shared the same spine: the idea that the tunnels were never just empty halls. Conspiracy theories filled the gaps where facts refused to surface. Hidden labs, failed experiments, ghostly apparitions. Every rumor fed into the mystery, making the place larger than life. Online forums spun tales of explorers vanishing without a trace, or of strange figures seen moving through the shadows. The graffiti reading "Help" or "Die" was pointed to as evidence, woven into a narrative where truth and fear blurred together. And so the site carried its own mythology, sustained by locals too uneasy to explore further, and outsiders too intrigued to stay away. Fact or fiction, it didn't matter. Every story, every rumor, added another layer to the fear and fascination buried beneath the soil. The very same fear the men now felt as they faced the question of whether to push further or turn back. Stay with us. The ending will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew, leaving the unknown behind. By the time they traced their way back through the tunnels, the weight of the place had already settled deep in their bones. What had begun as curiosity, just two pipes in a field, had spiraled into something far darker. They had seen the endless hallways, the chilling graffiti, the vault-like door, the strange machinery, and the unsettling shadows. Each step deeper had answered nothing, only multiplied their questions. And as they reached the entrance, they realized the most important decision they would make wasn't about what they had found. It was about whether they would ever return. The answer came quickly. They wouldn't. The discovery had thrilled them, yes, but it had also left them shaken. Curiosity had carried them into the underground, but fear had stayed with them longer than they expected. The graffiti, the warnings, the formations, even the possibility of someone or something still inhabiting the tunnels. The risk wasn't worth another trip. Some places cling too tightly to their secrets, and pushing deeper only courts danger. Yet, walking away wasn't easy. Every explorer wants answers, and these men were no different. The tunnels had dangled possibilities in front of them: history, war, science, conspiracy, legend, but all of it remained locked behind unanswered questions. The men had to face the truth. Not every mystery can be solved. Sometimes, the attempt only leaves you more unsettled than when you began. In the end, the discovery was not about solving a mystery, but about confronting one. They had learned something vital. Fear and discovery are often two sides of the same coin. And sometimes the wisest choice is to leave the unknown undisturbed. Because in places like this, the deeper you go, the less certain you become of what waits in the dark. What would you have done if you stumbled across this underground maze? Would you have gone deeper or turned back at the first sign of danger? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more mysterious discoveries, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're still curious, watch the next video shown on screen for even more hidden truths waiting to be uncovered.